All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Foster America Fellowship Introductory Webinar. My name is Marie Zemler-Wu. I am the co-founder and chief program officer of Foster America. I'm very excited to have you all with me today and to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about the work of our organization and introduce you to a couple of our fantastic fellows, as well as to answer any questions you might have about the fellowship application process. In terms of how we will spend our time together today, we're going to start with a little bit of background about Foster America and the fellowship experience. And then from there, we're going to spend the majority of our time on this webinar today hearing from Sheila and from Katie. We'll conclude the hour with some details on how to apply, and we'll also save time along the way for questions and answers. I apologize for my terrible cough. I've been alone this morning and haven't tested my voice yet today until I was on the line with you. Let's begin today with a chance to engage all of you. Although your lines are mute, we're very interested in your participation today. So let's start with the polling question. I think I'm cheating. For those of you who are on the line today, who can see the video slides, the answer to this question might be in front of you. So our question for the group today, for those listening in on the phone, is how many children will experience foster care placements over the course of their lives? And for those who are seeing the slides in front of them today, they can actually see the answer on their screen. It's actually 1 in 17 American kids between birth and age 18 who will spend at least part of their childhood in foster care. And most people find this level of participation in the foster care system to be a bit of a shock. This means really a kid on every block, a kid in every classroom is going to spend time using the foster care system over the course of their childhood. And at Foster America, we like to say that this is a child welfare crisis hidden in plain sight. Too few people, we think, go to bed each night aware and thinking about the vulnerable kids in our nation. And we've created Foster America in large measure to change all of that. At Foster America, we start from the mission that every child should have a safe and loving family, the benefit of unconditional love as they grow up. But the child welfare system today is falling short of making sure that all the kids who need the support to achieve that really indeed have it. Some people may think of the child welfare system, particularly foster care, as the deepest end of our child welfare systems, that this is the end of the road for kids and families when things have already not been successful. But at Foster America, we actually think of the child welfare system as an opportunity. We know that the children and families who encounter our public child welfare system often end up on a trajectory into other bad systems and other rough adult outcomes. So we like to think of the chance to work with children and families in child welfare as an opportunity to change the course, to stop a negative conveyor belt from happening and to promote positive outcomes for kids and families. We know that today child welfare involvement is at the root of some of the other major challenges our society faces, and that in fact those kids who end up in the juvenile justice system, those adults who today are in the criminal justice system, in great majority had an encounter with child welfare and foster care as young people. We know that kids who experience foster care disproportionately end up sex trafficked, homeless as adults. So we see the chance to work on improving outcomes for foster care as a chance to not only change this system, but to change the life trajectory and the long-term outcomes of kids and families who are involved. We also think a lot about the ways that our child welfare system reflects and reinforces other drivers of inequality in our system. We know that Black and Native American kids are greatly overrepresented inside foster care and then end up on this conveyor belt to other life outcomes that are challenging. And we also know that poverty is a huge driver of who becomes involved in our child welfare system. So in all of our work with the program and the fellowship, we strive to think deeply about and work greatly to improve inequalities inside of our system. So our approach at Foster America to making a difference inside child welfare is to bring leaders. And I hope that's why many of you are on the phone with us today. You're thinking about joining us as Foster America Fellows. Fellowship is our primary lever for changing the child welfare system, and we recruit talented professionals to bring skills that are needed inside our child welfare system to serve in fellowship roles. We are specific in what we're looking for in fellowship opportunities and the kinds of skills that we're asking our fellows to bring. We think the skills of our fellows are particularly essential to innovation, that the transformative capacity of our fellows comes from the ways that they bring skills grown in other arenas into some of the most reform-minded child welfare agencies in the country, and that together newcomers with fresh ideas can join with knowledgeable insiders, and the dance between new ways of thinking and deep institutional knowledge can make an extraordinary difference in creating innovative solutions. Finally, we at Foster America do not see our work in this field as an island. We never do this work alone. But in fact, we include our fellowship and innovation work as part of a larger movement that's going on right now in our systems for change. We are extraordinarily fortunate at Foster America in our short 2.5 years of history as a nonprofit startup to have had the chance to work with some of the most fantastic partners inside the child welfare system, including that we work closely with Casey Family Programs, Annie E. Casey, and others in the social innovation space, including the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, as well as other private sector partners like McKinsey Consulting, who have all been extraordinarily important in helping us to quickly build and start to scale our work. All of this for us is focused on a singular goal: to create better results for children. And we believe that together, leadership, innovation, and joining in a movement can create that kind of measurable change for kids who are already in foster care and for those who are at risk of experiencing abuse and neglect. So you might be asking, who are the Foster America Fellows? A few core characteristics that they share. Specifically, we're recruiting and selecting experienced leaders. Our fellows usually have at least 7 years of experience, and over that time have had progressive achievements. Most of our fellows do have advanced degrees. If you're on the call today thinking maybe you don't quite meet those criteria, we still encourage you to apply. We don't have a strict minimum threshold, but in fact look at each candidate. But over the course of our 2 years of fellowship experience, this is the general level of experience and educational background our fellows bring. The fellows come to us with specific skills for innovation, and we group those skill sets into 4 broad categories: strategy capacity, analytics, skills in finance, or backgrounds in human-centered design. Our fellows are matched to their local jurisdiction. So the fellowship roles, which you can now find on our website, are created in response to local needs. And our fellows are recruited and then vetted in response to the criteria and desired needs defined by the agencies that they'll be joining. The Foster America Fellowship is an 18-month commitment, during which time fellows are full-time employees embedded inside their host organizations. And over the course of that 18 months, fellows are intensively supported and receive training and mentorship from Foster America and our network of national child welfare leaders. This brings me to my second poll today. For those of you who are on the video line, could you share with us what your current professional background is? Where do you come to today as you, where do you come from today as you join us? For those listening in, the question on our participants screen is, what is your professional background? Corporate, technology, education, public health, or social services? Give just a moment more for anyone else who wants to click in their answer. All right, today education professionals are the largest group on our phone line, but we also have a distribution of participants across corporate, technology, and social service backgrounds. This is much like our fellowship cohort itself. You will find as you read about the roles we're seeking and come to know those currently serving as Foster America Fellows, a diverse set of professional backgrounds and organizations and professional origins are represented inside of our fellowship cohort. We're currently working with 9 child welfare jurisdictions nationwide to place fellows in our next cohort. So we began in 3 jurisdictions last year, expanded to several more, and with this cohort add Los Angeles and Colorado to the set of places where we've already been working. If you are talking to us today or joining us today from a jurisdiction that you don't see represented and you do not have geographic flexibility to consider moving to a new destination to participate in the fellowship, we do encourage you to nonetheless join us in the application process and share your interest and your background. We know we will have an additional expansion for the fall of 2019. And even as we speak, there are always a few straggling sites with some interest in welcoming fellows. So better to jump on in with us and share your interest and get started in the process of knowing one another. But these are the organizations that at this time we are actively recruiting for our 2019 fellowship cohort. All right, what is it like to be a Foster America Fellow? In a moment, I'll have Sheila and Katie share more about this from their own experience, but in a more general sense, Foster America Fellows serve on one of 2 kinds of mission and impact focused projects in the organizations that they join. And our fellowship roles are split about half and half over these 2 missions. The first is fellowships focused on the prevention of child abuse and neglect and the prevention of children's entry into foster care. And Sheila actually will speak some about this when she shares with us later. I would say her fellowship is quite squarely in this category. Here, fellows often leverage skills in either technology and data science, or oftentimes in human-centered design to think about which families are at greatest risk and what sorts of interventions can help them to keep their children safe, strengthen their family, and successfully remain together. The second type of fellowship project is to improve the experiences of children who are in foster care. And at least a sizable portion of Katie's work at Santa Clara County is focused on this. In this category, our fellows often use backgrounds in marketing or design to change the ways that business processes work and that agencies operate in relationship with their clients. They also often might use marketing or customer service skills, for example, to recruit new foster families and improve the ways agencies work with and retain them. As I mentioned earlier, there are some specific skill categories that we particularly seek applicants to bring to the Foster America Fellowship. And we know that in reality, oftentimes professionals' skill sets cut across these categories. But I think this can be a useful way to think about who we're looking for and who our agency partners are looking for. Our child welfare partners are often agencies filled with many with clinical backgrounds who have trained in social work, psychology, and had experiences doing direct services. These are the skill sets that we think are very complementary to those social work backgrounds and often underrepresented inside higher levels of leadership in child welfare, and particularly useful in driving innovation. So we're looking for data scientists and technologists, human-centered designers, and those with a background in customer service or customer processes, those who bring a background in strategy and partnerships, who are great at planning, facilitation, implementation of complex projects that reach across traditionally siloed parts of an organization. And then new this year, we are also looking for people with a background in finance or economics, those who can really sit at the intersection of the investment of resources and dollars and use skills like cost benefit analysis or performance management to leverage change. A quick look into what a few of the fellows from our first cohort have done inside their agencies. Adam Williams came with an MBA and joined the Rhode Island Department of Children and Family Services. And there he's increased the available supply of quality prepared foster parents by 25%, and in doing so helped keep kids out of group and institutional settings by making sure a supply of foster families is available to meet their needs. Our fellow Leela Pree had a background in public policy and training as a researcher before she came to us. She joined the New York Administration for Children's Services, where among her responsibilities, she developed a predictive model to determine which kids who entered foster care for the first time at school ages were at risk of growing up in foster care and ultimately aging out as young adults without the support of a permanent family. And then with that information, the Administration for Children's Services is able to consider what interventions can change the course for that very high-risk population. She's also worked to develop governance and ethics standards in the use of predictive analytic work and reducing racial bias inside the use of predictive analytics work. Our fellow Emily Iannacone joined the Allegheny County Department of Human Services and came with a background in human-centered design. She had previously been a White House fellow, and she grew the agency's capacity for using human-centered design, for really listening deeply to the needs of their end users, particularly their adolescent participants in their child welfare and juvenile justice systems. And she actually institutionalized some of that design thinking work into the ways the agency designs its contracting processes with nonprofit community providers. A final example today, our fellow Elizabeth Weiner had a public policy and public health background. She was a Peace Corps volunteer and worked in international development before she joined us. At New York's Administration for Children's Services, she responded to an emergent crisis soon after she joined the agency, following a particularly publicized child fatality in New York. The agency's hotline began to ring at a much greater rate, and families needed services at a higher and more frequent level. And the agency ended up with 500 families who had substantiated cases of child abuse and neglect, but whose children didn't need to come into foster care, despite identifying some really serious needs inside their family. In order to get these families rapidly off the wait list and match them with the services that they need, Liz worked across an interagency group of nonprofit providers, contracting specialists, people inside and outside the Administration for Children's Services to rapidly make sure that families at risk had what they needed. During the course of the fellowship, Foster America does not leave our fellows alone to fend for themselves, but in fact continues to be in deep relationship with our fellows and support them through a variety of different modalities. Throughout the year, fellows come together on a quarterly basis and really become a learning cohort to one another. In our quarterly meetings, they receive content on child welfare, results-based leadership, design thinking, and organizational change. And this is paired with mentorship, advising, and an online community platform as well. All of the supports from Foster America are really designed to help our fellows spark innovation, to challenge inequity they see inside their systems, and to create and scale innovative ways of making an impact. All right, I think we shall now turn our attention to the Foster America Fellows who we have on the line today. I want to thank and welcome Sheila Bowler and Katie Hubner for joining us. Sheila is currently at New York City's Administration for Children's Services. She came to Foster America with a background in human-centered design as well as nonprofit leadership and operations. Katie Hubner is at the Santa Clara County Department of Family and Children's Services, and she came to us with a background in data and analytics as a researcher, as well as a nonprofit and startup operations specialist. And she's been working in the county to improve the way that they make decisions using data, and particularly has been working with adolescents to make sure that kids in foster care achieve equitable outcomes with their peers. So they're going to each respond in a minute to some questions that I will bring to them, but I also encourage all of our attendees to take a moment and notice on your screen that you have a question and answer function. And should you have a question for Sheila, Katie, or both, please bring those questions into our conversation as well. To get us underway, Katie and Sheila, would you each take a moment to introduce yourself and tell our attendees a little bit about what attracted you to the Foster America Fellowship and what you were doing prior to joining us?
Absolutely. I'll start us off. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. As Marie said, I'm Sheila Bowler, and I am with the New York City's Administration for Children's Services. Prior to taking on this fellowship, my background is in child health, early childhood development, and child protection systems, the intersection of all three, but really on a global scale. And I had been working in East Africa as an entrepreneur. I founded a few organizations and was focused on strategy, operations, testing out small projects and bringing them to scale, and being able to show, measure impact with that. And I think, you know, I made a big switch moving from Kenya to New York with the fellowship. And what really brought me to do that was Foster America's focus on innovation and the push against the status quo. You know, I based on some personal experiences I had, I felt like the domestic child welfare system was a bit broken, and didn't see a place within that. But Foster America really opened up doors to say, we want you to be an innovator. We want you to challenge the systems as they are and really shake things up to improve outcomes for children and families. So that's what brought me to Foster America, and I'm so grateful that it did.
Okay, I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm based in Santa Clara County. I originally was trained as a development economist, and as Marie mentioned, have had a career that spanned nonprofits and operations and high tech. And what brought me to Foster America was really an interest in, as a development economist, you really look at why situations are the way they are. And in particular, I was very interested in using data to address issues of root causes of poverty and structural inequality. And child welfare is really the crack at the end of that whip. It's a bunch of children who are unfairly affected by societal problems that trickle down to put their families into crisis and, you know, ultimately their lives into crisis. My projects within Santa Clara County, to that extent, have been some of the most exciting projects I've had the opportunity to work on over the course of my career, because Santa Clara County is really committed to being innovative and data-driven, and trying to get ahead of some of these problems and have a rigorous understanding of why they exist, how social services contributes to them, and how social services can ameliorate them. So my primary project is working on the Foster Youth Aligned Action Network, which is a group, a consortium of nonprofits, social services agency, behavioral health, basically education, public agencies, and nonprofits who are interested in changing outcomes for transition age youth, so high school and older. And my role within that team has really been about twofold. It's one, helping the team think about how to use data to make smarter decisions. The central hypothesis of FION is that if the group could better leverage data, they could coordinate service delivery better. And if they could coordinate service delivery better, they could change outcomes. So I'm helping them set up a monitoring and evaluation framework to really understand that. And then also, you know, because I come from a tech and startup background, I'm also really helping them think past what is, I would say, like a normal government bureaucratic mindset of plan the next 5 years all at once, and then be like stuck with a processes plan, and more trying to take a iterative approach to let's call it like a series of pilots, where we really think about our work in 3 to 6 month segments of looking at what we need to achieve in the near term future, evaluating how we did, and then growing from there. And that sounds somewhat basic, but it's been a real shift in thinking for a lot of the people I work with. And then I actually work on the other side of the spectrum that Marie mentioned as well, and that Santa Clara County is starting to think about how they can be more aggressively involved in prevention, not just within child welfare, but how they can connect the work of the welfare system and their employment programs, and the work that child welfare does, and the work that even the adult and aging services does, and how do all of these things connect to create a framework for healthy families that can avoid crisis. And so I'm one of the co-leads on that project as well, just trying to start brainstorming, thinking about how we're going to collect all that information.
Thanks, Katie and Sheila. Each of you touched a little bit on this already, but can you tell us more about the team that you work with, and particularly the relationships that you have been encouraged and also needed to form inside your organizations, and the support that you've received from those around you in your agency?
Sure. I'll jump in here. And apologies, there's a train going by. So one of the biggest balances of coming into this program is, on the one hand, I at least was handed like carte blanche to just try new things. And that's a little bit awkward because most people don't get that much freedom in a government role. And at the same time, you really have to balance the fact that like I don't know that much about how things work. And so I needed to be really careful about both pushing, or continue to need to be careful about both pushing my ideas and building partnerships. And so within that, the first 3 months of the program is really spent getting to know your team, getting to know the teams you interact with, identifying who your partners are at other agencies, and just relationship building. But once that groundwork has been laid, I've had tremendous support. I report to the Deputy Director of Program Support, Research, and Evaluation, which is a big title, and she reports directly to the Director of the Social Services Agency. So because we get implanted at a pretty high level, I mean, I'm coming in fresh, and a lot of my peers have been working in my agency for 10 or 20 years. You both have this amazing access to people who really understand what's going on and can open doors, but it is also an awkward tension of you're coming in as this new sider with really high levels of access. And the program works best for people who can negotiate that balance of asking permission and knowing when to focus on a relationship, and also when to not, and to just recognize a problem and propose solutions without being asked to do so, without waiting for someone to hand them the work.
Great, thanks, Katie. Yeah, that's a great question. I think Katie, you talked about this briefly, and I just want to reiterate it. I think, one of the most important things about coming into this fellowship is that we are outsiders in a sense, right? We're coming from a different field. We're coming from a different sector. We don't necessarily have the background within this field, and I think that means the first bit of time is really about listening, about understanding. It's about taking the time to get to know everyone around you from, all levels, up, down, on the same level, to know what their job's like, what their experiences are, and what's working, what's not working, what are the changes they would like to see, and really just listening before acting. I think the other thing is that, I had a background in partnership building and management, and some of the skills that I had before were not necessarily what served me in this role. And so again, really understanding those around you. What is the sweet spot of those that you're working for and with, and identifying really what it is that will kind of win them over, and delivering to that effect pretty highly, especially early on, was so vital. And I think that, it's a unique environment where there's political relationships and complex relationships, and being able to navigate those, being very respectful and understanding, and really just being humble in everything that you do. We're outsiders, and focus on building those relationships so you can succeed together. And I would say that, I reached my point of really gaining trust and confidence from folks partway through, and it's transformed the work, and it's really made some outstanding results. So stick it out and build those relationships.
I want to continue to encourage those participating to share their questions. A couple of questions coming from the audience. The first is whether fellows are formerly in foster care, and I'm happy to field this question. We certainly appreciate the motivations that bring each and every one of our fellows to care about this work, and we also work really hard to create a diverse fellowship cohort. Within that, we have a handful of fellows who have lived experiences that drive their passion for the work, and many others who have various ways through their backgrounds, for example, as educators, foster parents, mentors to young people, have realized the importance of work in this field. But it's certainly not a requirement or the central organizing feature of our fellowship that our fellows are alumni of the foster care system. Katie and Sheila, maybe that's a great opening to a question for each of you about your cohort. Who have you served as Foster America Fellows with, and what has your relationship to each other and the rest of the Foster America cohort meant over the course of this year?
Sheila, you want to start that one?
Sure.
No, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting in your guys' place, so being on this webinar somewhat, around a year ago or so, and thinking of the folks that I saw, and just thinking that I was not necessarily at their level, and that's because the people that you do serve with are outstanding. The background, the experience, the level of commitment to this work has been really profound and outstanding. And I don't think that any of us we would have made it this far, but not in such great spirits without one another. And I've truly made lifelong friends in this. You're able to connect with, folks who understand the challenges you're going through, as well as can share, like I'm able to reach out to Katie and talk about, well, what are some of the, things that you're doing in Santa Clara that perhaps New York City could adopt, and vice versa. It's truly a social support, an intellectual support, a resource support network that is absolutely outstanding and makes this fellowship very special.
Yeah, I think building on what Sheila said, um, the first week that you're there is definitely when you're sitting in pre-training, you're a little bit like, what am I doing here? And then you look around the room and everyone in the room is so inspiring and so exciting that you just feel flattered to be included. And that kind of pushes you through giving the program a chance. And then by the time you come back to your next training, you're so relieved to see all those people again because you've been put in this new situation that's exciting but challenging, and having the support network of other people who are going through that same thing with you and being able to reach out to them and being able to meet up with them every quarter and kind of both go through trainings together, but then also go get drinks afterwards and kind of get into the weeds of what you're working on. It's immensely helpful. I actually feel a little bit guilty for everyone I work with who doesn't have this resource, because it's both it's an inspiration point, it's a support network, and it's also a chance to kind of regularly step outside the weeds of what you individually are doing and get perspective about, well, how is this being handled in other places? How are other people thinking about this problem? What are some resources I haven't thought about? What are some perspectives I haven't thought about? And within that, I personally have had a lot of amazing jobs, but none of them really came with significant mentorship. And I think between having the mentors and leaders that the fellowship provides and the support that the cohort provides, it has been one of the most just sort of validating and gratifying experiences I've ever had from a work perspective, because you're working on something exciting but also hard, and just having a network of people around the country that you can lean on and talk to is nourishing. And like, there have definitely been days when I was frustrated and I just put out a blast on our group chat of who is working on this or who has half an hour to like vent with me, and always someone gets back to me within 10 minutes and we're able to have that conversation.
We have a number of questions coming in from our audience now. A couple of people asking a similar set of questions about what's been most challenging in terms of what you have faced this year in your fellowship. And in particular, if you have any specific situation or story to share about challenge. And then a related question, whether the challenges and impact that you're trying to have in your organization was defined before you got there, or whether you have defined it along the way.
That's a great question. I love the second question in particular. I would say that the biggest challenge coming from an entrepreneurship world, running an organization, as COO, I was able to run with things, come up with an idea, run with it tomorrow, test it out the next day, and scale it, a few weeks later. You're just not going to be able to go with the same speed within a government agency. And I think that for some of us, that's been a challenge. We're really passionate and really dedicated, want to make things happen and want them to happen quickly for kids and families. But you got to kind of work within the system while you're still pushing it, a little bit and trying to challenge the status quo. But you gotta be patient with it. And that was absolutely something that was brought to me from Foster America before I started my role, but probably even, became more real when you're going through it on your own. So also defined by myself.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. So I had the office, I came in my, the director of social services with a straight face told me that he wanted me to work on structural inequality and he wanted me to figure that out, in a year. So, and I mean, what he was really saying was he just wanted me to come in and think differently about how the agency, whether or not the agency was basically missing the point of, was it helping the people it was existed to help? And that was an amazing opportunity, but not that specified. And I had some specified projects like the FION project, but even within that, it was like, well, this is what we're trying to do and we know we need help. But their role for me was not super defined. And so I showed up for my first day, spent 2 hours filling up forms, and then went to my cubicle, and that was it. There was no orientation, there was no training. Nobody shadowed me for my first day and talked about behavioral expectations or dress codes, or gave me an initial like getting to warm up project. And I think it has been uh, it was exciting, but also a challenge to spend that first few months just doing that landscape analysis of who are the players, what are their individual like stakeholder goals, and where do I fit in within this, and what is the agenda that I want to push. I think the other thing that has been a real challenge to answer the first part of that question is that you are balancing so many more agendas than you are used to, or that I am used to. So, for example, um, I'm coming from the startup world. Usually, in a well-run startup, people have different roles, but you all have like 2 or 3 top line goals that you're all pushing towards. And as long as you can explain how what you're trying to do in that moment is pushing towards that top line goal, um, everyone kind of agrees on what the way forward is. And in the government, you're dealing with a lot of different agendas. So for an example of this is I had to give a presentation that was going to involve directors from within the agency and also a lot of important people externally. And I went to our information services team and I asked for a data pull of a spreadsheet. And keep in mind, I had to ask for it because they don't like to let you pull data yourself because they want to gate the information so that bad information doesn't go out in the world. But they also don't like last minute requests. And so they told me that they needed 3 months to pull a spreadsheet that was 6 columns and 150 rows. So that's the kind of challenge where it's really frustrating to have someone with a straight face tell you that they need 3 months to do a 10-minute task. And that's where that kind of stepping back and thinking about those balancing stakeholder interests and understanding the pressures that the information services team is under, and also kind of knowing when to call BS and like pull strings and figure out workarounds it's just a constant negotiation. And you get better at it with time. But I think for your first few months, it's a little bit bewildering. And because you're an outsider and because you're a newbie, your default, appropriately, is to kind of step back and let it happen because you are trying to find that balance of knowing when to be the grease and the glue and like when to push something forward versus stepping on toes.
Some follow-up questions from the group about the insider-outsider status. So I'm going to combine these two. Coming from the outside, what's been most important to you in terms of learning and contributing to your impact? Is it history, legislation, state and federal systems, something entirely different? And then I also have a question here for more details about how you actually balance between the insider-outsider perspective. Could you walk us through some of the judgment calls you have to make as you balance the tension of getting to know your team while pushing new ideas?
Sounds a little bit awkward because I've seen some of the participant lists, and so I know that there are people who are involved in some of these decisions sitting on the call. But I have, for example, had to send emails to partners that tactfully said, I hear your concerns, but if we don't achieve this first goal, that concern is irrelevant and we have to push past it. And so for now, I need you to focus all of your energy on getting to this first goal, and then we can work together on your private concern. That's not a very specific example, but I think, okay, here's another example. I have this project that I'm working on that is has buy-in from the director of the Social Services Agency and buy-in from my boss, but it does not have, but it competes with a pre-existing project that had more buy-in from senior leadership within our Department of Family and Children's Services. And even though there are a lot of people who are interested in seeing my project come to completion, myself included. I made the judgment call to offer to postpone some of the meetings that I was needing to have that were taking up the time of the same staff as this competing project, because it was more important to me that the project get done at some point in the next, like the near term 3 to 6 month future, than that it get done in the next month, but rub people the wrong way and have the child welfare director be like, you know what, never mind, this is a waste of time. I'm pulling the whole project. And so, and that was actually, you know, what was kind of challenging about that was I had to communicate that decision to my boss, to tell her, because she was pushing me to push harder on it. And I had to say, listen, I agree with you that this work is really important, but if we push on this too aggressively and they squash the project, then we have wasted 4 months. So, and, you know, and that was about respecting, on the one hand, my boss is who I report to, but because I sit in social services, not directly in child welfare, I have to respect the autonomy of the Department of Child Welfare to make their own decisions about how they want to prioritize the use of their staff time and not push my agenda too hard.
I have a quick example that I'll give. So I was tasked with very little time and zero resources to complete an equity assessment of the entire agency. So that means what is, you know, is mandated by city law to assess the disproportionality and disparities that exist within the system. And I think that the initial response was a little bit of fear on the end of the agency and wanting to keep that tight in. And so it was kind of, you know, encouraged to complete this in a vacuum. And I don't think that that's the way in which that we can tackle equity. And so convened large stakeholders and groups to be able to tackle this together. And so it's a communal voice across the agency. And in result, you know, there were multiple city agencies across New York City that did this, and ours was the only one that passed and made it to the mayor's office. And I think in that sense, the success that was seen from that garnered support for, okay, I see what you're saying. Let's now invest more in collaborative approaches moving forward. And so kind of like getting those small wins in to get the buy-in from higher ups to show, you know, trust me in this process. I'm going to get you the outcomes you want to achieve, but here's how I'm going to do it, and here's why, and then just killing it and making sure it works.
Wonderful. So another question, I think I can probably field this one. Are there more than one fellow inside each organization? And then perhaps with that, Katie and Sheila, I can turn back to each of you because both New York ACS and Santa Clara are interested in welcoming new fellow or fellows to the organization in January of 2019. We have both kinds of situations with our host agency partners, some where a single fellow joins their agency and others where more than one fellow joins at the same time or have joined in sequence with one another over the course of our 2 cohorts, now moving on to 3. Fellows who join the same organization generally have slightly overlapping but also distinctive projects and come with different skills and perspectives to complement one another inside the organization. So Katie and Sheila, Katie has the experience of being the only fellow in Santa Clara. Sheila joins other fellows who came in the generation before her, and both organizations now are interested in bringing on more fellows based on the great work of these 2. Any comments to add on the ways you work with other fellows inside your own organization?
Yeah, I feel like I was one of the lucky ones before I got to my agency. There were 2 fellows, and I was able to meet with them beforehand, really understand what are some of the dynamics within the agency, what are what are some of the challenging aspects, what are the opportunities they see, and just made me feel a lot more comfortable walking in on day one. I felt like I knew kind of what to expect. We don't really work together. We're in very different divisions, but it enables us to grab coffee or grab lunch, here and there, and talk through challenges and really troubleshoot together. So it's huge, and I think it's an added benefit as Foster America grows.
And I had the opposite. There was no fellow here. So I was not one of the lucky ones, except A, I always had the network, and B, what that opportunity has meant for me is I actually kind of have helped set the tone for what the agency expects of a fellow. And I think what other fellows coming in will find is that their projects will probably be slightly more defined than mine were, but they will get similar levels of access and openness and freedom, because I think the agency has kind of learned that it works to actually let people solve problems instead of trying to give them an overly defined set of tasks that they just want them to execute on. So it's been kind of interesting actually, because like they've asked me, for example, to help out with like writing my contract, and I'm like, this feels like maybe a conflict of interest, but what the agency learning to bring in more fellows and work with Foster America is actually going to be the model that they'll use for all fellowship programs that they do going forward, not only with Foster America, but with any other, even internships or partnerships with academia. So it's kind of fun to be that trailblazer. And what has been really fun is actually being invited to the conversation and being asked to provide input on my experience coming in, and also, what is the best way to do it. Working at an agency where you are invited to sit at the table is just so great.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to take the next few minutes of our call to walk through some information for applicants. And if indeed we have a couple of minutes left at the end, we can turn back to questions for Katie and Sheila. Thank you both so much for sharing.
Actually, I'm really sorry.
You're going to step off, Katie.
Yeah, so that the group understands, I have a 9 o'clock meeting with, I'm actually at the County of Education, Office of Education right now, because I have a meeting with the schools and a bunch of nonprofit partners to help define how we decide who high-risk youth are within our county for the FION project. And I'm leading the meeting, so I can't be late.
Wonderful.
But feel free to share my email. I'm happy to answer questions privately, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
So quickly on these last few minutes of our call, I encourage you to all apply. We have, with intention, made the first step of our application process as easy as possible. Step one is to go onto our website and share with us your resume, a letter of intent, and a very brief demographics form. From there, candidates proceed through a phone interview. That first interview is very much focused on you as an individual, your leadership and innovation background and skills. And then in the second round interview, the video round interview, we dive much more deeply into the skill sets that you would bring to the fellowship. On that round, we also have an external partner join us in the video call who shares some similar subject matter expertise to your own. About 10% of those who apply will make it to our finalist day. This is an in-person opportunity to move with other candidates through a multi-interview round process, including a round that focuses on writing and product producing, another round conducted as a group, as well as some problem solving and analytic challenges. The final step in the selection process is to match with a host agency. We think it's incredibly important for fellows and those who host them at the agency to mutually choose one another. So finalists who have come out successfully from finalist day make an in-person or video-based connection with the agency to determine where they will be placed. Across all of these interview rounds, there are 4 competencies for leadership and innovation that we're continuously looking for and assessing candidates against. This is commitment to excellence, the ability to be influential, the creativity of your thoughts and approaches, and your persistence in problem solving. So these are also posted on our website, and as you make your way through the process of candidacy, we encourage you to think about your own experience demonstrating these competencies and be prepared to share with us the ways that your past experiences have demonstrated your ability in these areas. Finally, some details about the positions themselves. You'll find now that many individual fellowship roles are posted one by one on our website. We encourage you to read about the particulars of each fellowship there. Across all the fellowships, the projects are focused on results-driven leadership. All fellows join our network with other fellows and national leaders. Every fellow receives coaching, mentorship, and support. And our annual salary range is between $75,000 and $90,000 and does include employment benefits. We continue to support fellows who graduate from our program as alumni should they be interested in pursuing longer-term leadership in this field. And a big part of our mission is that we hope very many of you will indeed decide this is the spot to continue to deploy your professional skills. We do have some particular requirements of employment, U.S. work authorization, the ability to commit full-time and to remain for 18 months. These are in-person roles, not remote work, so being in the jurisdiction of your service, and the ability to travel to attend our quarterly convenings, as well as successful completion of any particular host agency requirements, which often include criminal background check, drug screening, or civil service examinations. In terms of timeline, the time to apply is now. Our priority application deadline is fast approaching next week, and the remainder of the vetting process happens through the course of October. We have 2 dates planned for Finalist Day, one for East Coast candidates, the other for West, and those of you in the middle of the country who make it to Finalist Day will attend one or the other. Those are November 2nd in Seattle and November 5th in Washington, D.C. Through the course of November, we then make those host agency matches, and the fellowship itself begins in January of 2019. That is the official conclusion of the content of our webinar today, but you'll see here my email address posted, as well as that of Shannon Scott, who is our Director of Fellowship Experience. If you have already applied, chances are you've met Shannon. If you do apply, you almost certainly will correspond with her along the way. I'll stay here for a few minutes more, and Sheila, I suspect maybe you have a moment or two to do the same if there are any burning questions.
I think, if you don't mind, Marie, I'd love to say one thing. Yeah, I think, oops, sorry. I got the chance to talk about the cohort and the position, but I think what is absolutely unrivaled, as I said, I had spent some time founding a few organizations and spent a lot of time in accelerator programs, mentorship programs. Nothing has ever compared to the professional development that we receive through Foster America, through the convenings. You can tap into Shannon and Marie throughout your fellowship. The women that run this, everyone who runs Foster America are some of the best people I've worked with and met in my life. And you get a mentor who is like an extreme, professional with, extreme dedication and clout in this field. I just think that the professional development is really unparalleled, and if you have any interest, jump at the chance to apply. I think it's pretty life-changing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar and encourage you, if you know others in your network who may be interested in this opportunity, to please help us spread the word. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see your name among our applicants very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sheila.